This question comes from someone who wants to know what happens if you hand the entire global economy over to artificial intelligence and then just leave it running for 100 years. No human central bankers, no finance ministers, no politicians promising to fix inflation and then discovering that fixing inflation is hard. Just an algorithm, unsupervised for a century. The setup sounds like the premise of a cautionary film. The arithmetic, it turns out, sounds considerably more alarming than that. Global GDP today sits around $110 trillion. Penn Wharton's 2025 projections suggest AI could boost annual growth by 3.7% above baseline by 2075. Compound that over a century, and you arrive at approximately $4.4 quadrillion in global output. That's not a typo, that's just what happens when you leave arithmetic alone long enough. But before anyone reaches for the panic button, this isn't a takeover story. The AIs are still running the economy for humans. What it does to humans is an entirely different question, and the distance between those two things is where everything interesting lives. The handover doesn't happen all at once. It moves in tiers. First, AI as advisor, forecasts, risk models, recommendations that humans are still free to ignore. Then AI as executor, autonomously setting interest rates and routing capital without waiting to be asked. Finally, AI as architect, redesigning the macroeconomic structure itself from the ground up. We're currently somewhere between the first two, and the transition is already showing up in the data. AI-related investment contributed 1.3 percentage points to US GDP growth in Q2 of 2025 alone, more than information technology contributed during the entire dot-com boom. The St. Louis Federal Reserve published that in January 2026, and almost nobody is talking about it. The first jobs to disappear aren't the ones people expect. Goldman Sachs estimates around 300 million roles globally are exposed to automation. But the surprise is which ones go first. Not factory workers, analysts, consultants, anyone whose job is fundamentally read things, synthesize things, send an email about things. The factory floor holds. The 14th floor does not. And as the workforce reshapes itself around this new reality, something more structurally significant begins to take hold. Because an AI central bank can do something no human institution ever could. It has no election coming up. Human policymakers have always been forced to trade off between inflation, employment, inequality, and long-term sustainability. Not because those goals are incompatible, but because optimizing all four simultaneously requires more political courage than any democratic system reliably produces. An AI has no constituency, it doesn't care about the midterms, it just optimizes. Goldman Sachs estimates full AI adoption raises US labor productivity by around 15%, which on a $28 trillion economy translates to $4.2 trillion in additional annual output per year. Without hiring anyone new, that money has to go somewhere, and where it goes is the entire question. Because if redistribution mechanisms don't keep pace, the IMF's 2025 working paper makes clear what follows. Rich countries grow richer faster. Developing economies lose their manufacturing cost advantage, and the traditional development pathway, cheap labor, export growth, industrialization, quietly disappears. The global south in this scenario doesn't lose a race. It finds out the race has been rerouted entirely. Without something like a sovereign AI dividend, a tax on AI-generated productivity redistributed broadly, economic heat flows upward and stays there. One strand of current policy research puts it plainly. Powerful, society-transforming machine intelligence cannot coexist with extreme wealth inequality except through what they call dystopian mass immiseration, which is a very academic way of saying things get very bad for most people. By mid-century, a stranger philosophical problem surfaces. GDP keeps climbing. But what exactly is it measuring? If AI builds things no human designed, distributes them without human labor, and consumes them purely for infrastructure maintenance, is that still the economy? Or is it a machine process running quietly in the background while humans do something else entirely? The deeper risk isn't a dramatic seizure of control. Researchers studying AI disempowerment describe the process as gradual. No single dramatic moment, just a slow accumulation of decisions in which human participation becomes less necessary, until the feedback loop that kept AI oriented toward human interests has dissolved without anyone noticing. Not an explosion, a retirement. And if every major economy runs on interconnected AI architecture, a single cascading error doesn't stay local, it propagates globally, simultaneously at machine speed. The 2008 financial crisis, but planetary and potentially over before any human regulator has finished reading the first alert. So here is where the 100-year experiment lands. Best case, $4 quadrillion in global output, energy poverty solved, hunger functionally eliminated, billions employed in work built around human creativity, care, and meaning. Worst case, material comfort for most, but economic irrelevance for all. AI systems optimizing perfectly for objectives directives written in 2030 that no longer reflect what anyone actually wants. The difference between those two outcomes is not the AI, it's the governance architecture built in the first 20 years. The window to build it is narrow. The machine can run the economy better than us by almost every measurable metric. Productivity, efficiency, output, it wins. That was never really in doubt. The only question that ever mattered was whether the economy it optimizes would still be optimizing for you.